Lemonada has paused Meghan's Archetypes podcast until 2025. Is it because Meghan is stuck with her TV series schedule with Netflix, or could there be another reason? Well, there's one more surprising thing in the latest news about the new media spokesperson for the lying couple, Harry and Meghan, and you know I'm going to clarify it in this video. So join me to take a closer look, and welcome back to the Queen's YouTube channel. Before we really dig into the main topic, I want to ask all of you your opinion on podcasts. Do you like them? Do you listen to them regularly? It does seem like it's really popular with many people. And I wonder, do I need to follow the podcast trend, or is it not worth my time? Honestly, I find it a little difficult to listen to podcasts. I'm more of a reader myself. And of course, I still want to be right here bringing interesting stories to you. Now, the podcast story is the topic that I want to talk about today. So let's see what we've got to offer. As usual, let's review some news first. Okay, so first of all, Meghan Markle announced with great fanfare that she signed a deal back in February with Lemonada Media. It's supposedly a female-founded company that's trying to make life less tiring, or so they claim. But what we also have got to mention here is that in the past, Meghan Markle worked with Spotify, I'm sure you remember, and she produced a whole series of podcast episodes called Archetypes. And then, of course, things started to sour in that relationship, and an executive for Spotify ended up calling Harry and Meghan effing grifters, and so they officially parted ways. So Meghan Markle signing this agreement with Lemonada to continue with a series of new podcasts is not going to be very advantageous for her, because this podcast company is actually much smaller than Spotify. But even so, allegedly, a new series of Archetypes is in development. According to sources, though, no work is going to be released this year. Instead, everything has been postponed until 2025, because I guess Meghan is so busy working on TV shows with Netflix. If you ask me, this move by Lemonada is incredibly sneaky and also pretty smart. Meghan Markle has not been able to show them her list of high-profile guests yet because she doesn't have any such list. Sources claim that she had a whole list of very high-profile guests who were scheduled to participate in her new series. I'm sure this list is not very long, and it probably only contains people we have never heard of. Now, I had heard of a few people on her last series. I hadn't heard of some of them, but most of them I had heard of. I mean, she had Mariah Carey on there, for goodness sake. I do wonder, though, if we can see how many people have listened to Archetypes on Lemonada. It's probably a fake number. Harry and Meghan are really big fans of that, or maybe it's just the squaddies listening. Most podcast creators, though, have other jobs, and they produce these weekly podcasts on the side. But no, Meghan is way too busy. She couldn't possibly start until 2025 because she's really busy filming content for Netflix for at least the next 6 months. Reportedly, Lemonada is also a bit worried that there might be scheduling conflicts between the launch of its podcast series and that of Meghan Markle's lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard. As we understand it, Lemonada didn't want the launch of the podcast to be overshadowed by Meghan's TV series, which apparently she has started filming at a rented home in Montecito. Apparently that started last week. So Netflix is saying the show would celebrate the joys of cooking and gardening, entertaining, and friendship. Yeah, I know, I threw up in my mouth a little bit too. But how on earth can Meghan not find the time for both programs? If she knew anything about how to balance her time, she could do it easily. Meghan, after all, has all the time, all the resources, and all the money to create some content, but somehow she fails every single time to deliver. We have seen this happen before. I mean, just think about how long it took her to get that Archetypes podcast out, in spite of the fact that she had almost 30 producers helping out. Meghan does not have a regular job, and even though she doesn't have a regular job, she's still got lots of help. She's got nannies, she's got housekeepers, she's got gardeners, cooks, you name it, drivers to drive her and the invisible children around too. Honestly, what do you think she does all day? I imagine she spends all day probably first looking online, looking for positive news stories about herself and Harry, and then if she doesn't find anything, she schedules a car parking lot walk, and she calls up the paparazzi to meet her there. And then also she has to spend a lot of time whining, of course, and blaming Harry for everything that has gone wrong. They're a couple of lazy grifters. There is no better description for those two. I mean, Meghan even admitted that when her kids were young, as if they're not still young. But anyway, she claims that when they were young, she would spend the whole day just surfing the net. This is what she said. Honestly, we don't even have to make up stuff about her to make her look bad. She does a good enough job of that all by herself. Meghan Markle is work shy and incredibly lazy, and so that's why all these deals with these big corporations keep falling through. And also, Meghan Markle is probably upset that she can't get the top level celebrities on her podcast that she wants to get. They want nothing to do with her. I also don't really understand this excuse that she can't do the podcast and the lifestyle brand at the same time. If she were to do both at the same time, it would actually make a lot of sense. It's called cross promotion. And it's not like Meghan has ever worried about oversaturation in the media before. After all, what do we expect from Meghan Markle? We expect some attention grabbing antics. This is just ridiculous. My prediction is this podcast is never going to happen. Remember that Meghan announced the deal before the Netflix reality show, and she really should have worked on that podcast because it should have been the priority. It was announced earlier. I simply cannot understand how this woman thinks what goes through that empty head of hers. How could the launch of her lifestyle brand possibly overshadow the podcast? It makes no sense. If you ask me, one would bring attention to the other, and that would really help the podcast and the brand, because otherwise, who's interested in either of those things? Celebrities often will have multiple products and projects out, and they're all launching at the same time. It doesn't make a bit of sense. It's obvious that Meghan just didn't have anything prepared for the podcast, and she wasn't ready to begin working on it. That's such a disappointment to these companies who keep on agreeing to work with Meghan. If I were Meghan, I would have plenty to talk about in the podcast series, like what it was like to start a brand and also what I had to learn about the process. I think it's a great excuse for her to talk about herself. I can't believe she is wasting this. I mean, come on, it's a perfect opportunity for her. And another thing, though, that we need to keep in mind is that the contract between the Carparkles and Netflix comes to an end next year. So obviously, Harry and Meghan are desperate to get the rest of that contract amount paid out. They know the deal is coming to an end next year, so they're going to try their best to create something fast before 2025 hits. So basically, I suspect as soon as this deal was announced, she just parked her failure of a podcast there for a fee. And basically, Meghan Markle had to pay Lemonada for that. So this is what I believe went down. All right, so number one, Spotify dumped her. They were absolutely humiliated by Simmons. And basically, the whole world at that moment found out that they were grifters. So Meghan Markle was desperate. She tried to make Audible happen, and they didn't want anything to do with her. And then somehow, somebody somewhere negotiated this deal with Lemonada. Lemonada is mostly unknown, so I guess at that time they thought, fine, it's a pretty good deal. Meghan's going to pay us. We can host her podcast for a year or so. And it looks like a win for both Meghan and Lemonada. Lemonada gets something for the streams, and Meghan Markle gets to brag that some other company is hosting her podcast. Everybody involved, though, I think knew from the start there wouldn't be any new content. This type of stuff gets pushed out to the public, that there are delays, and ultimately everybody goes their own way, never to speak again. Nobody is going to remember Archetypes by 2025. I mean, at that point, American Riviera Orchard will completely be gone. And I'm guessing Lemonada's understanding of this whole situation is do the podcast, don't do the podcast. We simply don't care. We only wanted our name to be out in the public domain. We wanted some PR for us. We wanted some attention, and that's what we've got. So bye-bye, Meghan. It's amazing that only a couple of months after Meghan signed on with Lemonada, it looks like this deal is already finished. Relaunching Spotify episodes in 2025 doesn't make a bit of sense. Who is going to listen to an old podcast and one that wasn't very good in the first place? Meghan Markle is not going to make anything new. We know that much. And if Lemonada had issued the Spotify episodes immediately, then at least they would have generated a little bit of interest and made some money for themselves. But now it looks like this is another failure. As always, Meghan Markle has just lost interest in the deal she already signed. Or I guess she's on to the next brand, American Riviera Orchard. And of course, there could be filming, which Meghan Markle absolutely adores. But is anything actually sold? I'm guessing no. I also couldn't help but notice I don't believe there is actually a signed contract with Netflix for this show. I think this is just her trying to manifest again. I guess she's just wasting her and Harry's money, and Netflix will have the choice to pick it up or pass on it. I hope they pass. I suspect they don't want anything to do with it. Meghan is trading a real contract for some hope of a TV show starring somebody who has proven herself to be incredibly unlikable. Meghan is so amazingly bad at this. I mean, it's really hilarious. Seems more realistic to me that Meghan would do a podcast during this time. At the beginning of the video, I said it already. Podcasts are a popular trend. And as for producing some stupid series about herself or Harry, who would watch a thing like that? I mean, if I were watching those series of hers, I think I would vomit. So I gotta say, if this announcement really was made by Lemonada, then they must be pissed because essentially Meghan has signed a contract with them, and now instead of working for them, she's filming for Netflix. She's just trying to meet the deadline for that Netflix contract, and she's trying to get all the money she can before they cancel her contract. Their deal is ending in 2025, and they're not going to be offered another one. It's also important to remember that Meghan has no natural talent. She has no skills. And to be good at producing something, whether it be a podcast series or a TV show, you do need to have some talent or at least some skill, or at least be willing to put in some hard work. They really don't care what type of job somebody has. We need to be trained for it. You have to have education to do whatever it is that you do. For example, people who find success on talent shows on TV, they spent a lot of time working towards that. They had to pay for singing lessons or music lessons or whatever. They had to practice their instrument of choice, or maybe they had to practice dancing. I mean, there was a lot that went into it. They didn't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to do this. And I don't know how much effort Meghan ever put into her acting skills. I don't think very much. I mean, Meghan Markle believes herself to be perfect from the outset. She doesn't believe she has to work hard for anything. And that is one of her biggest problems. Honestly, I'm shocked that she has gotten this far in life. I really doubt that she put any time into actually learning how to cook. And as far as this new business, she doesn't know what the hell she's doing. These ideas are all just results of her trying to copy other people who have been successful because they put in the hard work and they had the talent. So I really hope Lemonada is not waiting around for new content. I mean, think about how long it took her to release some pitiful content for Spotify. I think Lemonada is being very optimistic, believing that anything new is going to be made available in 2025. The best thing for Lemonada to do is just to stand by and watch the debacle that's going to be her most recent business venture, and then maybe they can escape any contractual obligations. All right, next up, I gotta bring you an equally fascinating piece of info. This issue is also related to Meghan's whole media story. So, Meghan Markle and Harry have just announced that Kyle Boulia has been appointed as deputy press secretary for the two of them after he spent 6 years with United Talent Agency. Okay, I was pretty surprised to hear this, and I'm guessing you were too. Okay, so of course, after I found out this info, I had to find out what exactly is the job of a press secretary and why on earth do Harry and Meghan need one. So this is the conclusion I came to after learning a little bit about it. All right, so first of all, a press secretary is someone who works for a government agency, industry, or organization, and their job is to help the employer communicate with the public. So these are PR professionals, and they perform similar responsibilities as public affairs specialists, but usually they know more about law, politics, and government. So as a press secretary, one's job duties include answering questions from reporters, writing press releases, writing speeches, planning meetings, and also presenting information to the media to improve the public image for the organization. And they will frequently, but not always, act as the organization's senior spokesperson. There are so many governments who have deputy press secretaries too. A deputy press secretary is usually a mid-level political staffer, somebody who assists the press secretary and communications director with some aspects of public outreach. Their job is often to write press releases and media advisories for review by the press secretary and communications director. And typically, there are assistant press secretaries and press officers, and they're the ones who support the press secretary. Press secretaries are also known for giving declarations to the media when some event happens or when some issue comes up inside of an organization. Therefore, they are expected to know a lot about the institution or organization they work for, and they should be able to explain and clarify things and answer questions about the organization's policies, the opinions on any particular issue, and its official standpoint on problematic questions. So what exactly does this mean for Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of hypocrisy? Are they planning to dip their toes into the pool of politics? Or are they some really impressive, strong organization with a lot of plans to help society? So after doing my research, I was even more confused than I was before I did my research. Okay, so now let's talk about this guy. At United Talent Agency, Boulia held the position of Director of Corporate Communications. His responsibility was to manage all client and executive communications for almost 20 departments and also lines of business, including literature, talent, music, podcast creators. So, in particular, Mr. Boulia focuses on the LGBTQIA+ community in the entertainment industry. It's a lot of letters, I know. So anyway, nothing wrong with that, right? But one thing I cannot for the life of me wrap my head around is why on earth he decided to work with Harry and Meghan. Boulia is not a newbie. He's been working in the PR industry for quite a while, and I'm sure he's heard all about these fake people, but maybe it's a good opportunity for him. I mean, now information about him is showing up all over the media, so maybe he's going to get something better. Meghan, though, has never cared about her staff. She has never valued anybody, and we can say the same for Harry. Neither of them take advice of experts because, remember, they know everything already. Their egos are so overinflated. I'm sure Boulia is going to have to put up with a lot of nonsense working for those two. And as for the Duke and Duchess of hypocrisy and lies, why in the hell do they need Deputy Press Secretary or Director of Communications? It's funny to me how they still act like they are royals, that they need a communications director. They're so delusional. They're just a couple of trashy D-list celebrities at this point. Nobody in Hollywood has a Deputy Press Secretary. Come on. In Hollywood, they're called publicists. I mean, obviously, they still believe themselves to be royal, even though they're obviously not. It is funny to me, though. I mean, it was like they were announcing things like this, like they were a very well-known company or organization with a really impressive revenue. They're not. And why can't they do anything like normal people? Why can't they do anything quietly? It's so weird to me. It reminds me of kids playing in the backyard, playing house maybe. They set up, play toys, and they dress up. But at least they, on some level, understand they're just children playing a game. So I tried to think of who else I've heard of having a deputy press secretary. The White House was the only idea that popped into my head. These people have lost the plot. They're such imposters. I mean, do you know any celebrity out there who has a deputy press secretary? So then I decided to dig a little deeper. I had the time, and I discovered that United Talent Agency, Boulia's old agency, is the same agency as Omid Scobie's. You know, the one who sent a draft of Endgame naming the royals at the center of a race storm to Dutch translators. I wonder, could this be some little reward? This is also the agency whose CEO called Meghan talentless. Now, I suspect Jason Knopf was caught up because they were his royal employers when he passed details on to Omid Scobie. But at least he did the right thing in the end. He tried to help the victims of Meghan's bullying. Now, this guy photographed, I don't know, I just think he's really sketchy. Let's see how he feels, though, after his contract ends in a year and he loses whatever type of bargaining power he might have in the employment market. Because he's not going to be able to perform whatever miracles Harry and Meghan expect from him. I also thought Meghan was a feminist. Why didn't she hire a woman for this job? Or what about, even better than that, a woman of color? I mean, out of all the people in the UK, she couldn't find one single woman of color to work for her? Oh, wait a minute, though. Meghan cannot handle any competition from women. And I'm sure she loves ordering men around too, thinking they all want her. She really is that delusional. And I guess they are convinced that this is the guy who's finally going to turn things around for us and get us the praise we have deserved this whole time. I'm curious about this guy, though. Does he have any idea what kind of mess he's in for? He looks really smarmy with that smug grin on his face, doesn't he? Well, he better get ready. These two phonies are so wrapped up in themselves, honestly, it's funny. They really believe themselves to be the head of state. Meanwhile, the family they hate the most, the Wales family, is getting lots of good media attention right now because little Louis has turned 6 years old. Happy birthday, Louis. There is one question, though, that I cannot get out of my head and I still haven't been able to answer. Is it a full time job or is it a part time job? Is it remote? Is he expected to go into some office? I mean, what do these two press secretaries even do all the time? I don't think they do anything. How pitiful are Kyle's skills or job opportunities that he had to join these two idiots, forgetting everything about them and their history with employees? I almost feel sorry for him, but something tells me I shouldn't. Something tells me he's probably about as bad as they are. So basically, Harry and Meghan can hire or fire at will whoever they want to. At this point in time, their PR and press secretaries just need to stop. It's really funny to me that Harry and Meghan keep on trying to make themselves seem more important by telling us who they've hired because, oh yeah, they used to work with Obama, for example. That's not impressive. This guy is gonna fail just like all the other ones who came before him. There is no way to right this sinking ship. It is over for them. I mean, the weight of their miserable behavior and lying has finally reached them, and there's no coming back from that. And I guess they've offered him a pretty good salary, or maybe he's just done at United Talent Agency, who knows? But I can't help but wonder how long he's gonna last. It's not gonna be long. Harry and Meghan would also need to offer a salary that offers good benefits like insurance, retirement, housing, maybe even a car payment, and job security, and I don't believe they're gonna do that. He simply doesn't look like the type of guy who can be bought with designer clothes and free makeup, or what, being Harry's new buddy? Or another option is that people like Boulia are just desperate for fame. The number of senior people who have worked for Harry and Meghan, these were not the people chasing fame, people who were actually skilled, but everybody left after a minimum, or real maximum rather, of a year. They never announced anything, so at least they could walk away with their dignity still there. But this guy, who knows what's going to happen to him? I mean, I think they're going to ride him until he's all worn out. He's going to end up like Scooby-Doo, who nobody wants to work with. All right, so finally, I got to express my opinion. I do hope that Lemonada is going to do something to resolve this whole issue with Carparkle Meghan, because I know that Meghan is going to be more than happy to destroy anything that doesn't benefit her. I mean, just look at the facts. Meghan started a TV series on Netflix, a well known and established producer, and she was willing to just set her podcast aside. Meghan Markle only wants fame and attention, so whichever side is going to be more likely to bring that to her, well, she's going to be willing to destroy the other side. Second thing, I'm just going to wait and see how long this Boulia guy sticks around with Harry and Meghan, because these two are never going to start working hard. They're never going to do anything to actually bring positive attention to themselves. I think he's going to become as useless as those two's grifters. I mean, their Midas touch is going to rub off on him, and you know it's the opposite of the Midas touch, right? I do hope that this Boulia guy is strong enough to withstand the two of them. If it were me, I wouldn't last a day working for them. I'm too honest. It really is a shame that somebody else has been brought down onto this sinking ship. So, how about you? Do you feel like I do? I do hope the information I brought to you is useful, and I would love to hear more about your opinions. They're so valuable because they really do enrich our discussions and they help us see topics from different angles. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye for now, and I'll be back to see you again soon in new videos on the Queen's YouTube channel.